This coin didn't come from a kingdom, it came from a company. And for 200 years, that company owned an entire island, commanded a private army larger than most European powers, and controlled a trade so lucrative it literally reshaped the map of the world. We're taught that empires are built by nations, by kings and queens and flags and conquests. But what if I told you that the most powerful commercial enterprise in history wasn't a country at all? It was the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, a corporation with a private army, the power to start wars, and a stock price that soared for nearly 2 centuries. And its ultimate prize, the source of its unimaginable power, was a single spice, nutmeg. To get it, they would commit genocide. To keep it, they would go to war with every empire in Europe. And in the end, to secure it forever, they would make a trade that looks, from our world, like the most catastrophic business blunder in human history. This is the story of a forgotten island named Run, and the day a corporation traded away a continent for a handful of magic seeds. The Dutch East India Company wasn't a company, it was a sovereign state with a profit motive. It could wage war, negotiate treaties, imprison and execute people, and mint its own currency. It was the world's first multinational corporation, and it was ravenous. Its entire existence was geared towards one goal, monopoly, and their primary target was nutmeg. In the 1600s, nutmeg was more than a spice. It was a legend. It was a status symbol, a supposed cure for the plague, a sign of immense wealth. And it grew in exactly one place on Earth, a tiny volcanic archipelago in Indonesia called the Banda Islands. And the sweetest, most potent nutmeg of all came from a tiny slip of land on the western edge of the group, an island just 2 miles long and half a mile wide, Run. The Bandanese people had traded nutmeg with Asian merchants for 1,000 years. They were savvy and independent. And when the Dutch arrived demanding a monopoly, the Bandanese on Run did something brilliant. They played their rivals against each other. In 1616, with Dutch warships prowling their coast, the elders of Run made a deal with a desperate underdog, the English East India Company. In a ceremony under the island's tall nutmeg trees, the English captain Nathaniel Courthope raised the flag of King James I. The Bandanese swore an oath of allegiance. In an instant, England had a foothold in the spice heartland. The Dutch were enraged. A monopoly isn't a monopoly if there's a single crack in the door, and Run was a crack held open by their arch-rivals. They besieged the island, they blockaded it. For 4 years, the English defenders and their Bandanese allies held out. They were starving, diseased, but they held that rock. Captain Courthope became a legend, but in 1620 he was betrayed, ambushed, and killed. The English resistance on Run crumbled. What happened next was an atrocity. The Governor-General of the VOC, Jan Pieterszoon Cohen, was a corporate fanatic. He believed in profit through absolute control, and the Bandanese were an obstacle, so he decided to remove them permanently. His orders were simple: subjugate the Bandas, and if they resist, exterminate them. What followed was a genocide. Dutch soldiers systematically destroyed entire communities. The population of some 15,000 Bandanese was reduced to a few hundred survivors. The islands were left silent. To work the nutmeg groves, the Dutch brought in slaves. The island of Run, now deserted, was finally theirs. The VOC had its monopoly. They guarded it with a terrifying obsession. Every nutmeg seed was soaked in lime before export to prevent it from being planted elsewhere. They controlled everything, and the money flowed. At its peak, the VOC was worth over $8 trillion in today's money. It was built on a blood-soaked monopoly. But the English never forgot Run. It was a symbol of their humiliation. And as the 17th century wore on, the global chessboard began to shift. The real action was no longer in the Spice Islands, it was in the New World. The English had established a thriving sugar colony on a tropical island called Barbados. It was a gold mine. But it had a horrifying problem. It was a death trap that consumed human life. They needed more land, more ports, more control. and their eyes settled on a prize the Dutch had already claimed, a bustling port on a large island at the mouth of the Hudson River, New Amsterdam. In 1664, the English simply took it. A fleet sailed into the harbor, and the Dutch governor, Peter Stuyvesant, was forced to surrender without a fight. The English renamed it New York. The loss was a staggering blow to the Dutch. The two exhausted empires finally sat down to talk peace in the Dutch city of Breda in 1667. The English delegation made a stunning offer. They said, "You can keep your little Nutmeg Island run. It's yours forever. All we want in return is for you to finally, give up your claim to that worthless, swampy island we took from you, Manhattan." The Dutch negotiators looked at their ledgers. On one side, Run, producing a fortune in nutmeg right now, a known asset, a cash cow. On the other side, Manhattan, a loss, a failed colonial outpost, a distant wilderness. To the corporate minds of the VOC, it was no contest. The spice was real. The potential of America was a fantasy. They took the deal. The Treaty of Breda was signed. The Dutch East India Company had just traded the island that would become the heart of the global financial world for a 2-mile-long spice plantation, and they didn't even know the clock was already ticking on their precious monopoly. Just a few years earlier, a man whose name was his destiny, Pierre Poivre, Peter Pepper, had pulled off the greatest corporate espionage in history. He had successfully smuggled live nutmeg seedlings out of the Bandas. The trees were already taking root in French colonies. The VOC's stranglehold was about to be broken forever. They had traded a continent for a commodity that was about to become common. The nutmeg from Run built a few thousand merchant mansions in Amsterdam. The real estate of Manhattan built global financial empires. Today, Run is a sleepy, forgotten island. You can buy a bag of its nutmeg for a few dollars. The spice that moved empires is now just another crop. So what's the takeaway from this forgotten story? It's a brutal lesson in the nature of real wealth. The Dutch East India Company, the richest corporation of all time, made the most expensive trade in history because they misunderstood what was truly valuable. They saw a commodity, a thing that could be grown, controlled, and sold. But they missed the real asset, a platform. Manhattan wasn't valuable for what it had, it was valuable for what it could become. It was a gateway, a hub, a place of connection and innovation. The VOC was a master of extraction, but it was blind to creation. The real wealth wasn't in the spice, it was in the port.